Oftentimes, Occam's razor is a helpful tool when attempting to solve a mystery, but sometimes the facts are so odd that one's imagination strains to render any reasonable solutions at all. Such is the mystery of James Ducat, Thomas Marshal, and Donald McArthur, 3 keepers of the 7 hunters haunted Eilean Mor Lighthouse. Sometimes, when things are a bit too strange, however, the facts as we know them might simply be wrong. Stay tuned and watch all the way to the end to see my conclusion of one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. If you are enjoying these Moonlit tales, please like and subscribe. And if you're about to click away, just hold on. Give me a few more minutes of your time. As soon as this story gets 20 likes, I will post another tale the following Wednesday. Thank you. Let's get into it. About 20 miles off the Isle of Lewis in Scotland lie the Flannan Isles, also known as the 7 Hunters, a chain of small, uninhabited islands named after the 7th century abbot Saint Flannan. On one of the 7 holy isles, another name for them, Eilean Mor, Flannan built a small chapel, where to this day it sits in obscurity and ruin, next to a fully automated lighthouse. It wasn't always an unmanned structure, though. Fearless men continually kept the lighthouse for more than 70 years, braving the storm-tossed seas, jagged windswept cliffs, and the other many perils of the archipelago, not least of which were the screams of forgotten men and a sinister shadow that has haunted the Isles for centuries. The Flannan Isles had long been viewed with a fearful reverence, imbued by Scottish mythology with an unsettling aura. Nevertheless, shepherds regularly risked the perils to bring, of all things, their flocks to graze on the nutrient-dense pastures. Chronically sick sheep were brought there to be cured, and ewes, who grazed on the grass, would regularly give birth to twins. No one dared, however, stay overnight. Even in the 18th century, it was generally known among the Scots that a nefarious spirit roamed the plateau, and whatever it was, it didn't like visitors. This compelled the natives to undergo various and sometimes bizarre rituals to guard against the ominous force. One common rite was to pray before the ruined chapel of Flannan while circling it clockwise on one's knees. This ritual, odd as it was, helped quell the dark influence, or at the very least, made them feel better about being there. But even just getting there was a chore. It was hard to sail the waters, it was hard to land, and even if you made the difficult climb up the sheer cliffs, you were met with the brunt of the wild and bitter North Atlantic winds that swooped up from the cliffs, often lifting unprepared visitors off their feet and sometimes into the jagged rocks below. Add to that the angry shadow and the memories of tormented men, and you've got yourself the ingredients for a perfect storm. Around the turn of the century, James Ducat, Thomas Marshal, and Donald McArthur would unwittingly take that storm, stake it to the breast of Scotland, and broadcast it to the world, as if with 3 blasts of a foghorn. The stage had been set atop old Eilean Mor, and the mystery would endure forever and forevermore. That said, if we dig a little, we can start to address some of the oddities that don't quite work out in this story, and our mystery begins in 1896. At this time, it was well understood by the shipping industry that Eilean Mor would be an ideal location for a lighthouse. The Northern Lighthouse Board accepted the design of engineer D. Allen Stevenson, and construction began. Its treacherous nature made the construction difficult at best, and it would be a frustrating 3 long years before the lighthouse would be completed. By December 7th, 1899, for the first time in history, the small, unassuming Eilean Mor uncovered its obscurity and shone a bright light out into the world 20 miles in every direction. And it would seem that this newfound visibility didn't sit well with the island herself. 5 men were tasked to maintain it. James Ducat, 43, the principal keeper with 23 years of experience. William Ross, first assistant. Thomas Marshal, second assistant, at 28 years old, being the youngest. And Joseph Moore, third assistant. They were all to maintain the lighthouse on site. 3 of them would stay on the island at any given time, and the 4th would rotate in every 2 weeks, all the while at least one man was to be in the lighthouse structure at all times. The lighthouse was never to be left unattended. This was a rule not to be broken under any circumstances. The fifth man, Roderick Mackenzie, stayed on Lewis Island off the coast of the mainland of Scotland to watch the lighthouse from afar, keeping an eye out for any signs of distress, as there was no radio communication with Eilean Mor at the time. For the first year of operation, it was a boon to the shipping industry. Everything worked as expected, but as you all know, that would soon change. December 7th, 1900, before departing Eilean Mor, Robert Muirhead, superintendent of the Northern Lighthouse Board, shook the hands of James Ducat, Thomas Marshal, and Donald McArthur, who had been covering for the first assistant William Ross, who was out sick. He wished them the best of luck, bid them adieu, and sailed on his way. 1 week later, around midnight, December 15th, just over a year after the lighthouse had been put in operation, the American steamer Arctur, on its way from Philadelphia to Leith, noted in its ship's log that no light shone from Eilean Mor. For a lighthouse in such an essential position, especially during a rising squall which was building, this was unprecedented. Fortunately, the Arctur was able to safely navigate to its destination without incident. However, for some reason, the issue wasn't reported to the Northern Lighthouse Board for 3 long days until the 18th. Upon word that something was amiss, an investigation began but was stopped in its tracks. The storm was getting worse, and no ships could safely travel the seas at that time. The relief vessel Hesperus attempted to launch on its scheduled departure on the 20th to impart supplies and Joseph Moore, the 4th lighthouse keeper, to the island, but alas, the waters were still too dangerous. Finally, 11 long days after the Arctur first noted no lights on the island, and 6 days past their scheduled shift change, on the 26th of December, Captain Harvey of the Hesperus and Joseph Moore made the trip as the weather permitted. Heavy fog obscured their approach. This in itself wasn't uncommon, but what set Harvey and Moore on edge even further was the sinking realization and a final confirmation of their worst fears. As Eilean Mor came into view, the lighthouse remained nothing more than a dark silhouette splitting the foggy night sky. 3 foghorn blasts and a flare all went unanswered. It had been confirmed something was terribly wrong. Moore and another crewman rowed out to the island, but Moore alone ascended the 160 steps to the plateau, where he met the closed gates of the lighthouse. Upon entering, he found the beds unmade, the clocks stopped, a half-eaten meal on the table, and an overturned chair. However, the lamp to the lighthouse was cleaned and prepped, ready to shine. The kitchen was clean, dishes were washed, and other jobs of the day had been fulfilled. Disturbingly, though, the occasional Donald McArthur's winter jacket was still hanging up on the coat rack, absent Ducats and Marshals. In the words of Joseph Moore, for some reason, he went out in his shirt sleeves. The piercing December nights would have made short work of a man without his jacket. Their sea boots were also missing, which implied all 3 of them had gone down to the landing for some reason, and McArthur without his jacket. The island was thoroughly searched, but no sign of the men were found. Moore's colleagues, but more importantly his friends, were simply gone. On the western side, significant damage had been sustained. The stairs, its railings, and a supply box had been smashed, strewing its contents about the island. And astonishingly, a 1-ton boulder had been displaced and dropped, crushing the pathway which led to the western landing. Perhaps the most unsettling fact was the absence of a life buoy that had been fastened 110 feet above sea level. It was missing, and it appeared, at least to Moore, that it hadn't been removed by human hands. The wind alone, no matter how fierce, wouldn't have been able to remove the fastened buoy. It must have been a wave high enough to reach the 110-foot buoy attached to the railing. Moore, along with a few of Harvey's crew, with heavy hearts, stayed on the island, lit it on the 29th, and maintained it until they could be relieved upon further investigation. Captain Harvey sent a telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board. A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshal, and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island. On our arrival there this afternoon, no sign of life was to be seen. Poor fellows. They must have been blown over the cliffs, or drowned, trying to secure a crane, or something like that. Mackenzie, the watcher on Lewis Island, was questioned by Robert Muirhead. He had recorded in his notes that he had been unable to see the lights from Eilean Mor as early as December 7th, the day Muirhead had been with the 3 men on the island, but that it shone on the 12th only to go out again that night and wasn't seen again until Moore lit it on the 29th. Mackenzie, too, as with the captain of the Arctur, had failed to report the anomaly to the Northern Lighthouse Board, rather instead insisting that it was commonplace, even with a telescope, to be unable to see the light for days on end due to the dense fog so prevalent in the area. It should also be noted that Ducat, senior lighthouse keeper, had wanted to test the response system to see how long it would take for supplies to go to the island in an emergency, should the light become non-functional. This was a conversation he had had with Muirhead on the 7th prior to his departure. The idea was dismissed. Muirhead, in his official report, surmised that some abnormal event must have lured all 3 of the men out from the safety of their lighthouse and down to the west landing, at that point suddenly being taken off guard by a giant rogue roller. Or in other words, a massive wave rolled over the top of them, sweeping each of them out to sea with enough force to displace the 1-ton boulder, and with enough height to tear the buoy loose at 110 feet above sea level. This hypothesis doesn't address why the 3 men broke protocol and left the lighthouse unattended. That aside, there is also a significant problem with the timeline of this theory. The logbooks, reportedly left behind by Thomas Marshal, paint a different story. Many sources cite that Marshal wrote on December 12th, severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years, and also that Ducat had been very quiet and somber, and McArthur was crying. On the 13th, he wrote that the storm was still raging and that it had brought all 3 of them to prayer. And then one more time, on the 15th, Marshal wrote, "Storm ended. God is over all." These reports from Thomas Marshal certainly add a dramatic flair to the story, but upon further scrutiny, they are a bit more out of place than you might originally think, and even downright bizarre, to say the least. For one, the lighthouse logbooks weren't meant to write your personal thoughts in like a journal. It was an official document that would be scrutinized to store numbers, statistics, and other detailed information about the facility and weather patterns. It was not meant to document your crew members' emotional states. But this aside, McArthur being brought to tears and Ducat being brought to pray in the face of a terrible storm, for experienced, well-weathered grown men, these details assigned to them seemed unlikely. The lighthouse could weather even the worst of storms, and they all knew it, and had for years put their trust in these buildings. If they had only stayed inside, they would have been fine, far from being brought to tears, even during the most terrible storms. But this isn't even the strangest part. The weather Marshal reports doesn't line up with the weather patterns reported from other passing ships at the same time, especially the Arctur, who was near Eilean Mor the night of the 15th. Prior to then, the weather was moderate in the area. It was only after the 15th that a storm started to pick up, not before. In fact, it wasn't until the 17th of December that a significant storm hit the shores of Lewis, where Mackenzie was staying. And Eilean Mor was 20 miles off the coast, relatively not that far. Superintendent Robert Muirhead also noted in his official report that the final logs had been written by James Ducat, not Marshal, and he took note of thermometer and barometer readings, and there was no mention of a storm of the century. So what on earth is going on here? Well, theories abound, ranging from the unfortunate mundane to the most bizarre things you can imagine. One of the most prominent theories is a rogue wave. A rogue wave took all of them out at the same time. Or even some forbidden romance that the occasional McArthur slowly became aware of, and some sort of foul play then ensued. Other ideas say that these men were delusional and hallucinating, to wormholes, to alternate realities, alien abduction, Scottish kelpies, pirates, angry ghosts, you name it. Pretty much anything you can imagine somebody has conjured up to try to solve this mystery. What happened to those three men? The most bizarre theory says they were turned into blackbirds by the angry Saint Flannan as punishment for disrespecting the sanctity of Eilean Mor. It was reported by some that when Mor entered the lighthouse, 3 blackbirds flew out as if they were trapped inside. This may or may not have happened, and it could have even been a real possibility. If there was a storm, maybe the birds were using the lighthouse for refuge. But I can't confirm that actually happened. But I can confirm something else. People telling this story as recently as last year, 2020, are failing to report on something that profoundly changes how we see the mystery of the Flannan Isles. This includes one of my favorites, mental floss, and also BuzzFeed mysteries. In 2017, researcher Mike Dash wrote an article sharing what he found to be the original source for Thomas Marshal's odd logbook entries. It's from an American pulp magazine called True Strange Stories, published in 1929, nearly 30 years after the original incident. The author, Ernest Fallon, said that he draws the logbook entries from English sources, but researchers have failed to find that original source. And upon further research, it becomes all too clear that Thomas Marshal's logbook entries are completely fictional, made up to make the mystery of the Flannan Isles even more sensational for the headlines. It turns out that fake news has always been a thing. Unfortunately, for nearly 100 years, Mr. Fallon was responsible for confounding honest researchers. At some point, the fiction made up in True Strange Stories had utterly suffused itself with the truth of Flannan Isles, weaving itself into the overarching narrative. And what's even more baffling is that the sources like Mental Floss and BuzzFeed, both as recently as 2019, are continuing to disseminate this false information, portraying it as just another weird fact of the mystery of the Flannan Isles, when in fact, at least this discrepancy can be accounted for. Although it's still uncertain as to why all 3 men felt compelled to leave the lighthouse, the Northern Lighthouse Board has given its final conclusion as to what they think happened. They said it was concluded that due to the very bad weather on the island, the men must have left the lighthouse for some purpose or other, probably to secure gear or to find out what damage had been done at one of the landing places, and had been caught by an unexpected large roller and swept into the sea. So this is the mystery of the Flannan Islands. Although we don't know exactly what happened, and certainly something odd did happen, but I think we can safely rule out alien abduction and alternate realities. Let me know what you think in the comments. Whoa. Oh, jeez, gosh. You think you can just oh man, I'm trying to wrap up a project here. Hi. Sorry guys.
Hey.
Where was I?
I just had a
What do you mean?
question.
There's always more,
sorry.
but
Just give me
I've got to wrap this up.
You have
You have 30 seconds. All right, you have 30 seconds. So I just real quick, I just want to read the final paragraph. I think it's important that you read that. Here, I can just do it. Here. After Robert Muirhead hypothesized about the large roller that swept them into the sea, he said, "Everything was in order. The lamp was ready to be lit, and it was evident that the work of the forenoon of the 15th had been completed. This indicated that the men had disappeared on the afternoon of Saturday the 15th of December." Okay, there. Are you happy? I'll cut that in if you want. So could you remind me why they were inspecting damage?
It was the storm.
You mean like the storm that happened before the 15th in Thomas Marshal's fictional logbook?
Wait, no.
I'm going with parallel universe.